Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. If an all-powerful, all-knowing, and completely good God exists, why is the world filled with agonizing random suffering? Today, we are unpacking the oldest, most difficult philosophical paradox in human history, the problem of evil. We'll examine the three traditional defenses for God's mysterious plan, why atheists argue the natural world contradicts divine mercy, and the terrifying question of whether infinite power comes with infinite responsibility.
Yeah, it is a massive, heavy topic today.
It really is. And the reason we are tackling this today is because, well, you, the listener, sent us some truly fascinating philosophical material.
Right, breaking down what is formerly known as the theodicy problem.
Exactly. For anyone unfamiliar, a theodicy is essentially an attempt to justify or defend God's nature in the face of, undeniable evil and suffering. It's the ultimate clash between what we want to believe about the universe and what we actually see in it every single day.
Before we step into the deep end of this philosophical pool, I do need to establish a crucial ground rule for our deep dive today.
Oh, definitely.
Because the concepts you shared deal with deeply sensitive religious arguments and very direct atheistic viewpoints, it is absolutely vital to state that neither of us here is taking a side.
Right, no sides.
We are not endorsing any religious doctrine, nor are we endorsing any anti-religious or atheist viewpoint. Our singular goal today is to impartially explore, unpack, and analyze these arguments exactly as they are presented in the material you provided.
We are strictly looking at the logic here. Just the tour guides through this incredibly dense philosophical landscape. And hey, if you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button.
Yeah, please do.
Because we love taking these complex deep dives with you, and that helps us keep doing it. So let's unpack the core contradiction resting at the foundation of this debate. The entire paradox relies on three specific traits traditionally assigned to the divine.
Right, the three omnis.
Yes, the three omnis. We were talking about omnipotence, meaning infinite power, omniscience, meaning infinite knowledge, and omnibenevolence, which is infinite goodness or mercy. But the friction starts the moment you try to hold all three of those traits in one hand and like a newspaper in the other.
Yeah, reality hits hard.
Exactly. When you look at the real world and see an innocent child getting cancer or a sudden earthquake where thousands of people lose their lives in an instant, a massive, logical wall appears.
Because if a creator has the power to stop that earthquake and knows it is going to happen before it strikes and is perfectly merciful.
Why does the ground shake? I mean, why does it happen at all?
Theology has spent millennia trying to square that circle. And the effort to protect those three omni traits has led to three traditional defenses provided in the text.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first one is arguably the most common. It's the free will defense. The underlying logic here is that a universe devoid of choice is just devoid of meaning. For love and goodness to have any actual value, autonomous beings must actively choose them.
Right, you cannot program a machine to love you and then feel genuinely loved.
Exactly. But the inherent risk of granting sentient creatures absolute freedom to choose good is that you also have to grant them the freedom to choose evil.
I mean, I see the immediate logic in that. It perfectly accounts for human-to-human cruelty. It explains why wars happen, why theft exists, and systematic oppression.
Humans doing terrible things to other humans.
Yeah, because we are flawed, selfish creatures exercising our autonomy. I think most people can comfortably accept that human cruelty is a human problem. But the argument hits a total brick wall the second you step outside of human interactions.
You mean when we look at natural evil?
Right, things completely outside human choices.
Yeah.
I want to use an analogy here to highlight the flaw in this defense. Imagine free will is a sandbox where kids are allowed to make mistakes.
Okay, sure.
They play, they build things, and sometimes they hit each other. That's free will, right? You blame the kid for hitting someone.
Right.
But how does free will explain a meteor striking the sandbox?
Oh, wow, yeah.
Earthquakes, tsunamis, diseases, they have wiped out children for millions of years. A baby with cancer didn't make a poor free will decision. So the free will defense just evaporates when confronted with the natural world.
It really does, which forces a massive pivot in theological reasoning. Because the free will argument utterly fails to explain natural disasters and diseases, the source text moves to the second traditional defense.
Which is what? Assigning a purpose to the pain.
Exactly. It's the concept that suffering is necessary for spiritual growth and character building.
Oh, okay.
The claim is that virtues like compassion and courage simply cannot exist in a vacuum. You cannot demonstrate courage if there is never any danger.
Right. Or cultivate deep compassion if no one is ever in need.
So suffering exists as a grueling but necessary tool to build human character.
I can actually play devil's advocate for a minute and see the psychological appeal there.
Hmm.
Scientifically speaking, post-traumatic growth is a documented phenomenon. You fail a crucial exam, you learn to study harder.
Right, you go through a breakup, you develop empathy.
Yeah, on a manageable scale, adversity often does forge stronger individuals.
Yeah.
But the text immediately challenges the limits of this idea, using extreme examples.
The unmanageable suffering.
Exactly. How exactly does a 6-month-old infant dying in sheer agony experience spiritual growth? They lack the cognitive development to even process their pain as a lesson.
The curriculum completely fails the student.
It does more than fail. It mocks them. And furthermore, how can anyone look at the victims of a genocide and call that a spiritual growth opportunity? It suggests their senseless trauma was just a mandatory prerequisite for soul building.
Yeah, that brings us to the fatal logical flaw embedded in the soul-making defense, and it loops us back to those 3 original Omni traits.
How so?
Well, we as limited humans have to learn through painful trial and error. We learn not to touch fire because it burns. But an infinitely powerful being, by definition, shouldn't be bound by the rules of trauma.
Right, they can do absolutely anything.
Exactly. If God is truly all-powerful, why is immense suffering a mandatory prerequisite for character development? They could easily cultivate human souls without subjecting them to agonizing pain.
Why design the system to require pain in the first place?
That is the core issue. If God is constrained by the rule that growth requires suffering, then God is not omnipotent. But if God isn't constrained by that rule and chooses to use excruciating pain anyway...
Then we have to question the omnibenevolence.
Precisely.
So, with both free will and spiritual growth falling short, the source text turns to the ultimate, final retreat for believers.
Yeah, the appeal to mystery.
The idea that God's plan is just beyond our human comprehension. The text calls this the most honest answer, but also the most problematic.
It creates a philosophical trap known as semantic collapse. If we concede that God's plan is totally beyond our understanding, we inherently lose the ability to define the word good.
Because language relies on shared meaning.
Exactly. When we use the word good, we have a collective understanding of what that entails. Promoting well-being, reducing harm, protecting the vulnerable.
But the moment you apply the mystery defense to a tragedy, you sever that word from its meaning. It's like praising a master chef for a brilliant recipe, even though the food tastes like actual poison to you.
It burns your throat and makes you ill.
Right. And the waiter just says, oh, you just lack the refined palate to understand this masterpiece. If you don't understand the flavor profile, calling it delicious has no real meaning.
It strips the word of its utility completely.
Yes. If the concept of good includes allowing a tsunami to drown thousands of innocent people, and we are told this is a higher form of good that we can't grasp,
then the phrase God is good becomes completely empty.
Exactly. It's just a phonetic sound we make with our mouths. If divine goodness looks exactly like human indifference, then we have no framework to engage with it.
And because all 3 traditional defenses collapse under scrutiny, we have to transition to how the source text handles the atheist perspective. Interestingly, the text notes that atheists generally don't use the existence of evil to absolutely prove God doesn't exist.
Proving a negative on a cosmic scale is incredibly difficult. You can't definitively prove a teapot isn't orbiting Jupiter.
Right, the classic Russell's teapot analogy. So instead, atheists argue that the observed reality of our world is violently inconsistent with the design of an all-powerful, all-knowing, merciful creator.
They point out the contradictions.
The text walks us through this brutal logic tree, a variation of the Epicurean dilemma. Step 1, is God aware of the suffering?
And if the answer is no, the claim of being all-knowing collapses.
Exactly, so assume yes. Step 2, can God intervene?
If God cannot intervene, the claim of being all-powerful collapses.
Right, which leaves the final, most devastating branch. God is aware, God has the power to stop it. Does God simply choose not to?
If a being simply doesn't care and does absolutely nothing while innocents are crushed, the claim of being merciful collapses.
You are analytically boxed in. Every exit leads to the loss of an Omni trait.
And the text observes the natural world to back this up. Suffering appears entirely random. The innocent suffer in agony while the cruel prosper in luxury. Nature is completely indifferent.
That apathy is the cornerstone of the atheist conclusion. The observable universe looks exactly like a universe governed by physics, not by empathy.
Which forces the conclusion that at least one of God's 3 omni traits cannot exist.
Yeah.
or such a God does not exist at all.
And that brings this massive, abstract philosophical debate down to a grounded, deeply human standard presented at the very end of the source text.
This part really stuck with me.
Imagine a normal human being with the power to save a drowning or dying child. They can simply reach in and pull the child out. Zero risk to themselves.
But instead, they simply stand by and watch them die.
Society and the law consider that human a monster, guilty of a massive moral failure. Why, then, doesn't this exact same moral standard apply to an infinitely powerful creator?
Right. How can total inaction be a crime for a mortal, but justifiable for God? We hold ourselves to a standard of intervention that we excuse the divine from following.
It makes no logical sense.
So to summarize, the problem of evil remains exactly that, a problem. It is this single most powerful philosophical hurdle regarding the existence of God, leaving thousands of years of human theology without a truly satisfying answer.
It really is the ultimate roadblock. Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over, building on the idea of God losing one of the 3 Omni traits.
Okay, what is it?
If you were forced to redefine the divine to make sense of the world's suffering, which trait would you be more comforted dropping? A God who is entirely all-knowing and all-powerful, but completely indifferent to us? Or a God who loves us deeply and weeps with us when we suffer, but simply doesn't have the power to stop the earthquake?
Wow. That is a terrifying question to leave on. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Keep thinking deeper.